So I'm Doki Tops, the CEO of Kalydo, one of the co-founders. And I want to tell you a little story about having a technology that brings games to a browser and then going back again to a desktop. What are we? We're an end-to-end cloud gaming solution. We don't run in the cloud, but we use the cloud for a lot of other stuff. We have 20 million install base, live in 15 countries. Well, actually, the games are being played in more countries, but if 10 guys in Africa play our game, that doesn't count for much. And we have channeling and game management systems to make it really easy to manage these monstrosities of MMOs. My talk, just as in the description, I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges of going from a big client to a browser. I want to focus really on the user experience because you guys are all into the browser gaming space, and what we're actually doing is taking the World of Warcrafts of this time and making them as easy to play as the browser games. And then, why the hell would you want to go back to a client again? Because we've been around since 2006, so that's quite some years. And actually, that's one of my conclusions. Not that the browser is bad, by the way, but more on that later. And I want to talk a little bit about the future. I will have quite some time for questions. First, the challenges. They are threefold. You have technical challenges, organizational challenges, and you have user interaction challenges. A lot of these challenges you guys all know, but it's also funny to rediscover them. Technical challenges. How do you get something that is huge, chunked, and compressed, and do it easy? Because doing this is quite a bit of work, or used to be. I'm going to show something. And then you have to ensure that big beast can handle the fact that files are not there, because we are basically streaming in files as you need them, ahead of time, before time. And the biggest challenge, I think, over the years, because we've seen some competition really go down on this one, is how do you make sure that this high-performance game keeps performing and doesn't lag? For many browser gamings, they are asynchronous, so frame rate or what happens is not that important. But if you go into real-time games, it becomes very important, because as soon as something goes wrong there, players will start complaining, and they complain hard, as you all know, because there's no difference in that sense between hardcore and casual gamers. People just like to complain. Organizational challenges. Yeah, I think for us, that's the biggest one. If you go to a client and they were used to a client game, and that team was fully tuned around a user experience that was a client. So you need to turn that around a bit, or try to get the organization to use the knowledge it has. One of the funniest things is that you have a big company that you work with. They have a browser gaming division, but exchanging knowledge between those teams is something that doesn't go well everywhere. And then there's some technical know-how. This is a bit of a commercial talk, so that might be lacking. This has been our experience so far. One point I didn't point out is the publisher-developer relation is also always a challenge, but for me that was more like a duh moment, because I've seen so many cases. There's always something. Well, not always. Yeah. How much work is it today? We started with a very different number, but you can change a big client into a browser game in 120 man-hours. If you compare that to the development of the MMO, well, I sometimes don't ask. I don't understand why people don't all do it yet, but hey, that's I'm preaching for my own church. And I want to show you a little demo. One of our guys came to me last week, and I hope this works. This is Aeon. You might know it. And he showed it to me running in a browser. It was also streaming as well. And we discovered that you can start playing Aeon after only streaming in 250 megabytes. Probably with some optimization, it can be a bit less. But and now it's fingers crossed. This is the demo. Sorry, this is Murphy doing its thing. I played it just before I got into the presentation. Hello? Oh, what the hell? This is funny. It's working. This is yes. Oh dear. Oh dear. Now everybody knows my code. I can count to 8. And what I have to tell you, this was all done without us touching one line of code. This is just our technology wrapping itself around the game and trying to figure out what to do. Oh dear. This is, well, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. This is me having a demo. Apparently, we sometimes still have some artifacts, but I think this just should not look that way. But this is enough, I think. I want to go on to the presentation. Hope you liked it. And with a little bit of work, I think this game can be done. And this is the video. Okay. Let's go back. So I told you about the challenges. I first want to talk about the user interaction challenges when you go from a client game to a browser game. Details matter a lot. One of the details is the full screen button. Some companies, they forget it. Apparently, there's also a lot of MMO games that you start on your desktop that actually start in a window, which I don't get, but some players are used to it. But when you go to the browser, people are used to YouTube. I want to play a game, I want a full screen button. But then there's another important thing is you want the game to look as beautiful as it can, and you don't want any settings, so it needs to go to full screen and take the maximum resolution possible, basically. If you don't do this, gamers complain. More on that later. The loading screens, they were designed for a 30 seconds to 1 minute waiting time. While in Holland, that's a good thing because in our office we have 120 Mbit connection, but our stuff is being played in the Philippines. So sometimes a loading sequence can take somewhere between 1 and 3 or 5 minutes. So then if you have one screen to look at, waiting takes a lot longer. And the current interaction flow, the whole website is revolved around pushing people to a download process and preparing them for it. Even the marketing needs to change. And that's all very important. What happens to the user? I think the main reason that clients come to us is very simple. You go from 7 steps and 6 hours to 2 steps and 1 to 2 minutes. That's a huge difference. What does that mean? Conversion rates of acquiring players go down massively. What's also very important is that the time zone when people are browsing, you as browser game companies know this, is very different. Waiting 10 seconds in a browser is totally different from looking at something on a desktop. Your patience basically is not there. You have 10 million things that can confuse you. One of the big benefits is that instead of people only playing from their desktop, they can now play at home, they can play at a friend, they can play at work and at school. We can see this. I will get back on that soon. And here's the big one. Complaining and musing, both, but usually complaining, becomes much easier. So it's much more difficult to have a client game that doesn't crash at any given moment. Why? It's maximizing the use of hardware of the system. A browser game doesn't really crash unless the browser crashes, or sometimes you can, make mistakes. But they don't happen that often. With a client game, they tend to happen a bit more often. But the worst thing is, I used to be on a desktop, so when something goes wrong, for me to start complaining is a long way off. I have to boot up the browser, I have to sign up for the forum, and I start complaining. When you're doing this in a Facebook environment, everybody's one click away from complaining. And we had to really guide our customers to improve the product, but also getting used to the fact that you get more complaints, because now this huge game, which tends to be less stable than a smaller game, especially on PC, on a browser game, has this problem. Yeah, and as said, quality expectations. When a player starts a browser game, they expect it to always work. Well, yeah, we try to achieve this by providing our customers with lots of technology, but all you can do is try to get as close as you want. User behavior. As I said, distance from playing to complaining is reduced. The quality pressure goes up. Every click becomes one too many. And this is something you as browser companies are way more aware of sometimes not. But every click is one too many. And like I just booted up Aeon, and everybody saw the Euler. I don't even know how to pronounce it. And when you click on the Euler, you lose people actually, if it's a browser game. If you have the client and somebody downloaded 15 gigabytes, you won't lose that many people. But you lose people on the Euler. And I'm also wondering, what does it add to you? You could better do that in the registration process, instead of boring people every time you play. And as I said, again, desktop time versus browser time. I already told that one. But there's also a very different one. There's in-game the time zone, and there's an in-game time zone. If you let a player wait to load a game, a browser game, for 2 minutes, no problem. 3 minutes, no problem. But if they have the feeling they are inside the game, and then they have to wait 2 or 3 minutes, they start complaining. So it's the same time, different place. And I think managing this, also in big browser games, because we also had some Flash games run on the platform in the past, they also really suffered from this. That once you're in the game, you want to basically reduce waiting to 0, or give them the feeling that they're actually not in the game, because then you can get away with more waiting time. There's also a tendency that all the users that you were used to were patient because they were used to a 6-hour process. Now you're getting a much broader audience, and they're all impatient people that get annoyed a lot faster in the sense for waiting than a hardcore user would. And there's another thing. They expect the browser version to be of lower quality. This is bad for us because the quality of the game actually doesn't change. It's the same graphics, it's the same content, everything is the same. But even if you have to show the user a screenshot to really convince them that it's the same, because they think it's a browser game, it must be bad. In graphics, that's the hardcore user. As browser game developers, you might feel slightly offended, but that's how they talk. And the really big difference is hardcore user, when he boots up a game for the first time, he will tend to go to the settings and fiddle around with graphics. A browser user just wants to play a game. They want to press play and do it for them, basically. That was one of the big things we also had to adapt to and help our clients with. I wanted to share some numbers with you guys. For a client game, we get 75% of registered users into the game. In some markets, or in many markets, getting 50% is humongous. But if you have a 5 gigabyte or 4 gigabyte client, in many markets, you're lucky if 20% end up in the game. So that's a massive change. The speed at which they can play is around 25 to 50 times faster. We've even seen 100 times faster. That's with Runes of Magic. As I said, 85% of players, we can see this in our analytics, can now play Runes of Magic in 5 minutes. This is a big thing because they can now easily play this game in Poland or in Eastern Europe or in Asia. That's a bit of a commercial. One of the interesting parts is that we can now see that these games are being played on 3 to 4 different systems. Just like with normal browser games, our technology requires no user rights. So that makes the boundary to start playing a lot easier because user rights usually cost you some conversion. Some more numbers, some cool stuff that we discovered. Do not use a play button. I think even for browser games, this should be done. We've seen several customers remove the play button and gain up to like 6-7% of conversion. You would say, a play button? Everybody knows what a play button is. You lose people. Select a server, also a funny thing. You lose a lot of people there because the user interaction is not clear. And the funny thing is this accounts for also the free-to-play browser games. That's mostly talked about here, is that you know what server you want to take the user to before he gets in, when he's a new user, because you want to fill up a server as fast as possible because that makes you the most money. I don't know many other free-to-play games, unless it's a Zynga game, of course, but like a Settlers game, you want to have enough people there. So don't bother asking the question. Security software, not applicable to you guys, but big MMOs, they have Hack Shield, they have all kinds of software against hack protection because the amount of money per user that is spent is a lot. So if people abuse things, you can really get a killed community. So we understand they do it, but we prefer to have a good architecture for the game where you don't need it, but you lose people. What's very funny is that the conversion rate is, when you go to low bandwidth countries, we see that conversion rates stayed the same. So one of our clients went live in South America, Poland, these areas. So we saw the time to play that it took to get into the game became 5 times slower, but eventually the number of people that ended up in the game, the percentages, they stayed exactly the same. And that was quite amazing to see. And I think you guys know this as well, a loading bar really matters. If you have a good loading sequence instead of a crappy one, I think you can even lose more than 4% conversion, depending on what type of game you have. And this is something that, for you guys, it might be, something that you already know. But for a lot of big-end, high-end MMO developers, this is like you really have to convince them. You need to even show them the numbers 10 times over before they really are convinced that they should improve. I want to share with you some lessons that we learned over the years. We've been doing this process since 2009. The technology started developing in 2006. Details, full screen, single sign-on. So when you have a Facebook Connect, that takes you directly into the game instead of logging into the game again. The ability to smoothly navigate from the game to the shop, to the community and the forum. All these little details are very, very important for eventually the user to be happy. And what we also learned is gamers have a really different time perception. So in the beginning, what we did is we maximized, say, make the starting package as small as you can, so you get the player in. But as I said previously, the time zone when people are playing inside a game, they don't want to wait. Then they become very agitated when they have to wait. So what we're doing now, instead of saying, take a 30 megabyte starting package, is take 150, doesn't matter. Make sure they don't have to wait in the game anymore. That's a funny thing. And a really big one, I don't know if more technology companies are here, but technology is never the issue. Technology, usually a bug or something gets fixed in 2 weeks. It's the organization, it's the people, it's project management that really determines if you can pull something off. Convincing someone they need a full screen button, for example. Because if they launch the game without it, people are going to complain. And getting everybody on board, basically. Most time was spent in many projects on project management and aligning all the different parties. And to come back, as I said, from desktop to browser and back again, we came to the conclusion that a desktop really starts to make sense again. Because what I'm going to say right next. Why does a desktop make sense? Why the hell? We've been selling this. I've been selling this for 2 years. Take your big client, bring it to a browser. It's awesome. And now I'm telling you, go back to the desktop again. But I'm not saying only go to the desktop. I'm saying it's an and story. It's not an or story. The big thing is, and I think this is also a very interesting thing for browser game companies, to bring your game and make it a standalone thing that people can launch from their desktop. Why? There's no distractions. You should just make a screenshot of many games, and when you're in a browser, there's 20 tabs that might be open that I can click on at every given time. Even worse, I get all kinds of messages, so you don't really have full attention. And the nice thing is, when I boot up my PC, I immediately see it. With Windows 8, this becomes even more powerful, because I think any company that could have a browser game that has shelf space, that's what I call it, people's shelf space on their desktop, that's value. That creates retention. And you can still enter the game from a browser as well, but you can do both. And for us, it means less risk of performance issues, because if you're trying to run Aeon in a browser and someone has they have a computer that's fast enough to play the game, but then they decide they have 20 tabs open and the 21st is the one in which they want to play Aeon. You know, Google talks about all the sandboxing and that it all shouldn't really impact things, but it does in the end. So it has a lot of benefits there. And with our technology, the time to play goes down. But can you imagine playing a Facebook game from your desktop? So you're double-clicking for the first time on this thing, and all you have to do is Facebook Connect, and you're in the game. You almost have zero friction, and you have all the attention you want to have from your user. He's yours. And that's a very big difference from running in a browser. So my suggestion is also browser game companies, if you have a successful running game, try to make it standalone. We know how to do it, but it's not that difficult, actually. To end up, just my 5 cents for the future. It's not and, or it is and, but not always. As I said, with the browser client thing, I would say it's always an and, because you're on the same platform and you have multiple entry points. Basically, browser is 100, maybe 1,000 entry points because of your partners, but also 1,000 distraction points. And the desktop is 1 entry point, but no distractions. I think PC gaming will rise again, but it will be redefined, because I think Windows 8, though people complain about it right now, I think it makes a lot of sense. And the tablet and the power that you get, getting an i7 with a fat GeForce and a mouse keyboard interaction is powerful, and have games that make use of the touch interface. So I think PC gaming, that's also what we do, is being redefined, but it is growing. I think a tablet hybrid rocks. I like Windows 8. I don't have it on my laptop yet because I have to do some demos, and almost all games run already, but our customers still have to do some things. I do not believe in full cross-platform gaming. So everybody I show with this MMO, they say, oh, wouldn't it be cool on a tablet? I say, no, it's crap. Because it's a touch interface, and the game is either designed to be really well on a touch interface or be really well in a different interface. And you could have 2 different versions of the game, one specifically for a touch interface, but with a real-time game, I'm not talking about a social game, having players play against each other doesn't work. There hasn't been one first-person shooter or RPG that was played that has a player versus player element on a console and a PC. And they are, pretty close when you look at the interface. But when you look at a tablet and a PC, it just doesn't work. I think that's also the reason why Blizzard doesn't do it, because people always feel that it's unfair. Trying to have someone with a mouse out-sniper him with your console is not going to work. So I don't believe in that. And maybe this is part of a discussion. The TV is a bit of a blur to me. Everybody's all hyped up about the TV, but then I'm thinking the consoles really are about a family in a room playing a game. And most social games, you can play them in the living room on your TV, but would you really want to do that? Is that really interesting? Because won't you just annoy the rest of the family because it's boring to watch? Watching someone play Farmville on a TV is, I don't know, it doesn't excite me. I don't know about you guys. So the TV, I do see an opportunity, but there's lots of market, for example, where they only have one TV. Maybe if you're a kid and you have rich parents and you have this flat screen in your room, yeah, okay, it's freaking awesome to play like that. But the TV I don't see, then for me the TV is not a platform, but it's just a big monitor, basically. So that's it for me. Hope you liked it, although it was a bit of a messy start. If you have any questions?
Sorry, I might have missed that part, but how exactly does your technology wrap a game to be a browser game? Is it a Flash game after that?
No. The performance of the game is identical. The code of the game is not changed. There are some technologies that basically we don't do any virtualization, because then you get a high-performance game and you reduce the performance, and it already needs some good hardware. I'm not going to tell exactly, but we know how to hook into the game and wrap it basically in a browser. But that's only part of the story. Actually, the browser story is 1 hour, or the biggest time we spent making this demo, it was 1 day, was downloading it and then installing it. and then it took 5 minutes to run it in a browser. Basically, we have ways to, you take the game window, you need to render it in a browser, but you also need an interface to start communicating with the browser. But we also have interfaces for how you load your files. And we can also automate that process where it just knows how to chunk up a game without even knowing the game, basically. It's a bit of voodoo. We don't share basically how we do it because it's a pretty competitive edge to be able to do this without any code changes. But I have to tell you, to get the final result that players like, some changes are required. That's why I said it takes around 140 man-hours of some adaptations to the game to really have a smooth user experience.